welcome to Tech Education. We have a great guest again today. This is Doug Beach, Assistant Principal from Mount Logan Middle School in Logan, Utah. So welcome, Doug.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming in.
Glad to be here.
I guess first off, tell us a little bit about your experience with cyberbullying, what you've seen, and how recently this has become a problem in your school.
Yeah, sure. Probably since I started working. So in the mid-90s, when internet became really accessible to students and in their homes, those things started to gear up and become more prevalent for kids, particularly in the last several years as technologies have improved and Wi-Fi accessibility and hot zones and things like that in cities have improved. Every kid has their own device just about. Even in a school like mine where 65% of the kids live below the poverty level, most of them have their own device. And just with the proliferation of those things, we've seen more and more trouble that comes with it. Probably a lot of it has to do with just the ease of accessibility for kids.
Right.
The days of calling out someone in person are kind of over for class bullies, and it can all be done electronically now, and so we see a little bit more of that than we used to.
Okay.
It's certainly a problem that we deal with literally every day at a school.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess going off of that, how would you describe the typical student that is involved in cyberbullying activities, whether it's an instigator or a victim? Is there a certain type of student that is more prone to that type of thing?
Sure, yeah. I don't want to profile kids, but I see some commonalities among them, and not in any particular order. But I noticed that kids who struggle with that haven't been taught well by their parents, for one, and I'm not casting that back. They haven't been taught well by the school either. Generally, not always, they come from two categories of kids. Kids that come out of really like poverty situations. They don't have as many significant other adults in their lives as other kids do. And kids that come from very affluent situations because they have access to every toy and bell and whistle that their parents can afford to buy them. And then just a group of kids who just have a hard time expressing their feelings and have difficulties with peer interactions, tend to get involved in those things more often than not. But I really have found that there's a very common thread between disrupted homes and kids who are involved in the drama that comes with Facebook and social media and the use of phones and things like that at school.
Okay.
And the awful comments and things that they may post. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's great. You and I talked a little bit about the uses and gratifications theory and how these behaviors might just be the way that a teen or adolescent is trying to satisfy or gratify some personal need that they have. Can you elaborate on that a little bit and why you think... Let me backtrack. What do you think a person is trying to get out of cyberbullying?
Well, this might be not the answer you're looking for, and I hope you'll just bear with me for a minute. But over the course of my career, I've come to realize there are just these basic human needs that everybody has. And every problem I have at school is because one of those four things isn't being met. I use the words inclusion, affection, control, and competency. And oftentimes when kids are involved in cyberbullying, one of those needs is not being met, either a control need or an inclusion need or an affection need, something like that. And so those are needs we all have. You and I have them. Competency, for example, I know I don't feel very good when my wife asks me to do something and I'm not capable of pulling it off. Passive people will respond to that in one way and aggressive people will respond to it in another. And I noticed that among students that kids, it's such an important, at my school, they're adolescents and preteens and peer acceptance and popularity are probably the most important thing in their life. Being part of something outside their family, part of a group, part of a clique, whatever, that inclusion need is so big that kids will do just about anything to become part of it, including putting other kids down to be cool with friends or to be funny with friends. And so as I've noticed, kids that have gotten involved in those things, particularly with Facebook and awful comments, they have a couple things going on. One, usually their parents aren't very good role models and they're involved with them in the problems. They'll often sound off on in behalf of their child, thinking it's going to help when actually it exacerbates the problem. But mostly kids who don't feel included, don't feel loved, they'll use those as means to to work their way into a group or to feel better about themselves or to overcome some of their own insecurities. And not unlike it's always been, but it's just so much easier to do it now.
Certainly.
And the two real big problems I see, and you may get to this, but the two big problems I see is that it can be very, very private, meaning you may not know who it's coming from, and that creates a scenario that's very difficult for young people. And then the other issue is the other end of the spectrum where it's so public that in an instant, almost every classmate can hear false rumors or ugly things said about someone. And once it's out there, it's so hard to reel it in.
Right.
And so as a school, we constantly deal with the challenge of how to help students who've gotten caught up in that either as a victim or a participant, and how do you help them fix the problem that they've created for themselves, at the same time give them some kind of training and direction for how to handle it in the future. The biggest problem and the biggest piece of training that I do is teaching kids how to, when they've had a problem, how to fix it, and how to teach their own friends that they've taken care of the problem and not to continue to be involved as part of the problem.
That's good.
So it's difficult,
You touched upon some of the major reasons why cyberbullying is such a damaging behavior is the anonymity. People can come on and get online and create false profiles and use that to attack other students or other peers. And also how public it is. Traditional bullying is sometimes limited to just the handful of people who happen to be on that part of the playground or that part of the hallway, whereas cyberbullying is now open to anyone online and can be viewed by multiple people. So tell me a little bit about what you as an administration or as a school tries to do to prevent this type of behavior.
Yeah, there's two things that go on. Prevention's certainly the way to go. If it never happens, it's certainly a lot easier to deal with training parents and students than it is to try to put out the fires that are created when somebody makes a mistake or isn't kind in their speech or actions. There are policy decisions, obviously, that go into all this by every school board in America. So having good policy about how those devices are used at school and at home and what consequences can come because of it, and then just being really clear with parents and students about expectations that you have as a school. I mean, it really comes down to is your speech necessary, kind, and true? If it's not all three of those things, maybe we shouldn't open our mouths, and it's hard to teach that to a 12-year-old, and it's often hard to teach it to an adult. But it's something I haven't even mastered in my own life, but it's something that I try to teach my students as I visit with them and counsel with them, is just, if you don't have anything to say that's true, necessary, and kind, all of those things, because there's often times when things are true, but they're not really needed to be said. Right. I mean, you may have a friend who made a mistake, but there's no point in having, reliving it through text messaging or gossip and all of those things. And so we do spend a lot of time just making sure our policies are this has been a difficulty too, because we want kids to have their own devices in their hands because it's such a necessary part of how we teach in flipped classrooms and in the 21st century. But at the same time, we need them to use them appropriately. So we spend a lot of time talking to students about what the appropriate uses are for electronic devices and just the social part of that at school. Right. And then parent training is a part that I wish we were better at and had more of. I'm hoping that something like this would yield a place where parents can go and get some advice about how to take care of those things. I've often wondered why some students never have problems with these kinds of things at school and why others do. Right. And it's kind of what you're getting at, but kids who've been taught well by their parents typically don't have these kind of problems. They just know how hurtful it can be, and they've been taught not to be that way, and so they don't participate in that regard. So a really important part of it is just parent training component, and then policy, obviously, at the school, and then training of the students. Specifically, things we've done, most of it's private, like one-on-one counseling with our guidance staff and social workers and the administration. But I've often felt like that I'm kind of the triage guy. It's like I get them after they're already wounded, and I wish we could do more to prevent some of the heartache that comes from students who've made bad decisions about hurting their classmates and friends.
Well, that's great. Well, we sure appreciate you sharing your thoughts and ideas on this, and we appreciate you for viewing this, and would ask that if you have any comments or advice or feedback, please feel free to comment on this video and let us at Tech Education know what we can do to help solve this problem of cyberbullying.